On a homestead or in your backyard, having the right tool makes all the difference. Today we're going to talk about the most important tool you can have in your toolbox.
Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Kylene.
And I'm Jonathan. Today we are back with Dennis and Michal. We had so much fun the first time, we needed to do this again. And for those of you that missed the first one, it was all about all the mistakes you can make and how to avoid those.
When you're homesteading.
Yeah, when you're doing a homestead. And so we'll put a card in the corner. You can go back and check that out and learn all about them. But today we're talking about tools and about the importance of tools and having the right tool. So welcome back and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
So you guys have a really interesting philosophy about tools. Why don't you share your philosophy with us?
So this has come out of a lot of personal experience the wrong way. So if you don't use the proper tool for the job, you will likely end up either getting hurt or harming what it is you're working on. Probably Michelle never does this, but I'm constantly thinking, okay, the proper tool is such and such. Am I willing to get up from what I'm doing, walk or drive to the barn and get the correct tool?
Right.
Oh, no, I can make do with this. And generally when you do, you're going to regret it. So that's a big part of what we want to talk about today is using the proper tool, the tool for the job at hand. You'll have better luck. You'll be hurt less frequently, and you'll get the job done.
And that one is super significant, the whole safety piece. And that was my first thought is because sometimes Kylene teases me a little bit about, it's all about the tool, you know. But having the right tool allows you to get it done faster and probably more important, more safely. Because if you hurt yourself, then you're down. And that puts you behind.
There are times. I remember one of the times shortly after we were married and the car wouldn't start. And we were at church and he comes out of church. I've got the hood up on the car and I've got my high heel out and I am hitting the connection on the battery cable. I didn't have the right tool, but the car started.
It did. So every once in a while, that's okay. But
he's been trying to.
So I'll tell you what you do when you get in that next time, Kylene. I don't recommend drinking carbonated beverages, but Coca-Cola works real good to eat battery acid. So if you have a corroded battery, pour a little bit of Coke on it.
See, but
there we
that's
go.
The problem. I wouldn't have a Coke with me, but I had my high heel.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. So
Poor
we digressed
Jonathan.
a little bit here, but let's talk about these tools and let's talk, Dennis, let's start with you and some of your favorite tools and the things that get the job done better.
So we tried to pick tools that would apply to all of your audience, not just those that are homesteaders.
Yeah.
So whether the audience is in a suburb, has a backyard or 100 acres, it doesn't really matter. These tools, I think all of these tools will apply to everyone in your audience. So the first set of tools that we worked on were tools for handling trees. And there are numerous different kinds of tools for cutting trees, trimming trees, etc. But we picked out some specific ones to focus on. And I'm going to name them up front, and then I'll explain more about each of them.
Okay.
Starting with the chainsaw, I personally have 8 different chainsaws.
Whoa.
They're different sizes. They're different means of conveyance. In other words, what drives them. And the biggest problem that people get into is the one size fits all mentality when you talk about chainsaws. Everybody thinks buy the biggest one that you can afford, gas powered chainsaw. Well, the problem with that is every time that I have cut myself with a chainsaw, it has been the biggest and most powerful. And I used it long enough that I began to get tired. And when you get tired, you don't take as much care and you end up getting hurt, as I mentioned earlier. The second tool that we'll talk about in depth is everyone knows what loppers are. Loppers are generally hand-operated loppers for trimming limbs, but we're going to show you a battery operated lopper. Requires just the squeeze of a button. And then last but not least, what is generally referred to as a sawzall with a tree trimming blade. So those are the three tree trimming, tree cutting tools that we're going to talk about today. So any questions before I start on those?
No,
Nope.
jump in.
I just think I need some new tools.
Yeah.
So in the video, the first one that I showed was the battery powered loppers. As we mentioned to you guys at another time, Michelle loved the tool so much, I had to buy a second pair for her so that I wasn't always having to try and find her to get mine back. The battery powered lopper, there's a couple of things that I really like about it. Number one is you don't have to use two hands. So one of the problems with operating any cutting tool is if it requires two hands, you're not holding the work. And if you're cutting above you, it's going to fall on you and you have no ability to stop it. So that's one of the really nice safety factors for a handheld lopper is you can hold the limb and cut it and control where it's going and so forth. So it's quite a bit safer. Just don't get your finger too close to the mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing that I especially like about, and we showed that on one of the videos, was the ability of loppers you can stick them in the ground and cut something below the ground. The last thing you want to do is cut something off and leave a short little stump. I have recently face planted because I didn't cut something off below the ground. And
Yep.
So that's another beauty about those loppers. Now, a full-size two-handed mechanical loppers will do the same. You can cut below the ground with those as well.
There are limitations into the size that those can handle, but they do handle, a pretty good size limb. And it's really great when, for us, because we live in a heavily wooded area, and I like to trim the yopon that grow around the trees. I can just pull them out from the tree and just trim into the ground. And that way I'm cutting as deep as possible and removing the debris.
The second tool is the sawzall. Specifically, the one that I showed on the video is a battery operated sawzall. I have, because we are so wooded, I've gone through at least 6 or 8 of those over the
10 years.
15
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
we've been
15.
here. The last one I bought, I decided to splurge and buy the biggest and most powerful one I could buy. So generally they're a 18 or 20 volt battery. I bought a 60 volt sawzall and I'm so glad that I did. Now, of course, it's great for cutting limbs. You can cut limbs up to probably 4 or 5 inches with it, with a tree trimming blade. I recommend getting a blade that has carbide teeth because it will stay sharp longer. They cost more, but it's worth it in the long run because you'll be able to use one for days.
Not longer.
Some of the other nice things I like about the sawzall, especially the battery operated ones, is you can again plunge it into the ground. So in the video, you will see me cutting a dead tree off below ground level, so that when I'm done cutting the tree down, Michelle can mow in there and she's not going to hit a stump. There's a couple of other things you can do with regard to being able to use that in the ground. If you're digging a post hole and you've got roots, the sawzall, because it's long and narrow, you can take that sawzall and just shoot the blade straight down into the ground and then cut in a circle. And I'll cut all of the roots, and now your post hole digging will be much easier. You can even use it for trenching. So most people know what a trenching shovel is. I had to run some power cables in a pipe from one barn back to the house for some solar power. And I didn't want to use an excavator. Yes, we have an excavator. Because I didn't really need to bury it that deep. So I took that sawzall and I literally plunged it down in the ground and started walking with it, cutting roots as I went. And then I did another stripe 4 inches over. And then it was easy cutting that out. And I had a nice 4-inch trench, a foot deep, with very little effort.
Wow, I think the difference between their soil and ours is they've got tree roots you're worrying about. With us, it's all rock.
Yeah. It's a different story with rocks.
It's a different story. Yeah.
And then the last one is the chainsaw. As I said, I've got 8 different chainsaws. I've got 3 gas powered and I've got 5 battery operated.
It's a man who's proud of his tools.
Yeah.
Well, it's
necessity because they're all different sizes.
it's truly to have the proper one for the job. So I only demonstrated one of them in the video. It is I would call it a medium size. It's a 12-inch blade, medium size, battery operated. They do make bigger battery operated ones. The one I demonstrated is a 20 volt. They do make a 40 and a 60 volt, but you have to remember, if you're going to be using it for a long time, when your arms start getting tired, that's when you get dangerous.
Yeah.
And you end up hurting yourself. So that's a good one. It is just light enough that it can be handled with one hand, so you can cut and hold on or push if you're cutting a tree down. So you'll see that in some of the videos. The different kinds of batteries operate at different speeds, so they have different safety factors. A battery operated chainsaw operates much slower. So when you take your finger off the trigger, it stops much faster than a gas powered. A gas powered, when you take your hand off the trigger, it continues to spin for quite a while. And that's often when people get hurt, is because they let go, they hold on to the handle with their left hand, if you're right hand, and let go of the trigger, and you think that it stopped, and you sling it down by your side, and as it's going by your legs, it cuts you because it's still turning. That particular one that I showed that with the 12-inch blade, I can cut anything up to a tree up to 10, 12 inches thick. But generally I use that whenever I'm limbing. That means I'm cutting small limbs, or if I have a tree I've down, I cut all the limbs off of it with that instead of with the gas powered, because I won't wear out as fast and I'll get just as much work done.
I just was thinking about the battery operated tools. I was pretty resistant at first to look at battery operated tools, but I have been so impressed with how well they work and just your ability to actually get a lot of work done very quickly. So that those tools are getting better and better.
They really are. I had a good friend. We had a big ice storm and had a lot of trees down, and a friend was going to come over and help me. And he was very proud of the fact he had bought a brand new gas chainsaw. And I asked him very nicely to leave it at home. And because I told him I've got lots of chainsaws and we'll pick the right one for the job. He used one of my battery operated chainsaws. And when he went home, he returned the gas powered chainsaw and bought himself a battery operated one because he realized how well they work.
Yeah.
So they're not for everything, but they're very effective.
Right.
So I showed you some fencing tools, and you may say, well, we live in the city, so we probably won't need that as much. Well, you don't know if you'll need it or not until you know that it's available for you. So what I was demonstrating was essentially a farm fence, field fence, barbed wire, or what's actually called field fencing, and T-posts and those kind of things. So there's a number of tools there that, even though you may not have fencing for livestock, you will find many uses for. The first thing that I showed doesn't seem like it's really a tool, and that is what we call a cat claw. And so I typically buy those online. All of you have probably experienced pounding in a U-shaped fence staple. The problem with hitting your post with a hammer is, if you're like most people, like me, you've set a post in concrete and you haven't waited till it's really, really set up, and you start pounding on it to put a staple in it. And you might crack, you may not even notice it, but you might crack that concrete. Concrete takes up to 2 weeks. Even the fast dry stuff takes up to 2 weeks to reach its full hardness. The nice thing about the cat claw is you put it in with a screwdriver, with a battery operated screwdriver. It has more holding power than the staple, It's faster to install. It does cost more, but you can take it back out very easily if you need to change the fence, open it up, or whatever. And we use those for all kinds of things, not just fencing.
Yeah, and you can reuse them. That's really nice. And they do come in different lengths, and so your screw can go into deeper or shorter woods based on what you buy. But they've been a great tool.
So then I also demonstrated a couple of different kinds of connections for fencing to T-posts. So T-posts are obviously very common in the country. You get a standard clip with the T-post, and so I demonstrated a tool for installing those standard clips. I didn't do it very well because I don't use those very often. You get those clips for free, and it's you get what you pay for. They're good, but if you're trying to keep cattle or goats or big animals in,
or out if you're doing a garden
or out,
fence.
yeah. In our case, we try and keep the pigs in and the wild pigs out. I don't trust those clips as well. So the upgraded clips that I buy are installed with a power drill, much faster, easier, and far stronger. They're probably 5 to 10 times as strong as a standard clip because they go all the way around the post. And you can use them for installing other things, not just fencing to T-posts. The last thing that I demonstrated, so there's lots of tools. We didn't have time for all of these tools, so I only picked 3. There's lots of tools for repairing fences, but this is a simple repair. Most of your fencing will get saggy, and because animals will push on them. The goats walk up and down, leaning against them, using the fence to scratch their whole body.
All our
at one
fences
time.
end up kind of bowed out because they just rub themselves on it constantly.
So I demonstrated a tool that you use that crimps the fence, which then tightens the fence back up. So you start with a very saggy looking fence and you end up with a nice tight fence again.
Yeah.
So that's one of the tools I demonstrate as well.
Yeah.
That's cool. I haven't ever seen that one, so I'm particularly interested to see that.
Okay, so Dennis, we covered all your tools, but now Michal, I think I'm going to be very interested in your tools. Tell me about some of your secret hacks.
Well, with out here, we have multiple gardens in different locations, and I'm always hauling things from one place to another. And I had tried several different means of which to transport things. And my problem was he found this wonderful wheelbarrow that was fabulous, but it weighed as much as me. And I had a hard time maneuvering that thing. And I was like, if I put stuff in here, I can't even drag it. So it's like, no, you can have that one. And I had a big 4-wheel wagon, which is very useful, but I needed something that was more versatile, easily moved, and not quite so heavy. And I came across this garden cart that is by Ames, and it is the most wonderful thing. I fell in love with it and have actually contacted the company a couple of times when I needed more, because I'm always wanting them in numerous places. I don't want just one. I need them all over the property. It is so light. It's easy to maneuver. I love it that it's easily pushed or pulled. And so it doesn't really matter what the job is or where I'm at. It can be easily maneuvered around. It hauls things wonderfully and it dumps great. Very sturdy tub. And so, it checked all my boxes. So it's my favorite garden tool.
When we started buying those many, many years ago, they came with pneumatic tires.
Yeah.
Air in the tires.
And they were constantly losing air, and I was getting frustrated with that. And so now they've upgraded to the hard tires.
Yeah, they're solid
and
rubber.
So they're great. And, so they do really, really good out here. I really love them. So that's one of my favorite tools.
Even if you live in the city, the nice thing about that, it doesn't take up a lot of space. You can stand it up on end in a corner and it's out of the way.
And it looks cute. It's not an ugly.
Cute is important.
Cute is important. It's only me who sees it and the animals. But hey,
it's cute.
So,
we like cute.
It
matters.
But and then also a really good hose and the hose nozzle. We have gone through, I can't tell you how many hose nozzles, trying to find ones that do well for us, that have all the features we want of all the selections. But the main key is easy on and off. And we found this one.
Most of the garden nozzles has a little thumb,
has a
just
small,
a little bitty thing to push with your thumb. And after a while, it starts getting gummed up and you can't push it with your thumb anymore.
Yeah, pretty soon you just can't ever turn it on or off. So you just leave it on and then just turn the hose off. And it's like, that doesn't really help me. And so we found this one that it has like a fireman's hose on it handle, and it is wonderful. And so, I mean, even with his big arthritic hands, he can maneuver those things. So that's wonderful. And then he found this wonderful swivel to put on the end of your hose between your nozzle and your hose, which keeps your hose from being kinked up when you're pulling it out. Because, you know, if you're like me, you drag it through the garden and it gets kinked up. And so this keeps it from being such a big deal.
So if you hold on to the nozzle and just start pulling, that swivel, every time you go through a loop, it will rotate that hose automatically for you. So you get to the end, you have a basically straight hose laying on the ground, not one that looks like a
that would be so nice.
Yeah. And I have both hard hoses and the soft expandable hoses, and it works great on both. And so, I mean, it's just great.
The most important thing about hoses, they always have a line on them so that when you put them away, you can tell if it's twisted. If you put it away twisted, that's when you're going to end up with a kink in it next time you pull it out.
Yeah.
So take the time to twist it when you put it up.
It's really amazing how just one little small thing like that swivel can just make such a huge difference in your attitude and your
attitude. That's right.
Yeah.
I get so frustrated with some of the hoses that it's just
And watering is therapeutic to me. I love to water. I mean, we have a sprinkler system in our front flowers. It's the one place I let myself have, a flower bed is my front yard. And so, and watering it in the evening is therapeutic, and having that keeps it from being frustrating at all. And then one of my other ones is a weeding tool, which I don't even remember the name of it.
Hula hoe.
And so it is a cut and drop method. So you're cutting the roots of those weeds and dropping them right where they are. So there's no picking them up and gathering them, but it's an easy way to get around those things. And the handle is really, really long. It comes with 3 big pieces. You can make it shorter. So if you have like raised garden beds, you can make it just one of those 3 pieces, which is very convenient for smaller, spaces. But I love the long handle because it can get down my walkways, and I show it a little bit on a video where I'm kind of weeding around a few things, but I use that the most. That's been one of my favorite tools.
I think it's awesome. And I think that leaving the weeds there as long as they haven't gone to seed is actually super important, because you're returning all those nutrients to the soil, and it makes great mulch and all kinds of.
And from my perspective, it just kind of says, look who's in charge here.
You showed him his boss.
But it's like, yeah.
You go ahead and make my day, right? All of those tools that I've mentioned can be used whether you're in a small homestead or small garden, backyard garden. I mean, they really are beneficial. So
that is so awesome. So are there any other additional tools that you guys want to talk about?
Well, so one, we had a friend move out to the country from the city, and he wanted to hire a plumber to put in an outside hose bib on his house. That's what you call the thing you hook your hose to. Yeah. And I suggested to him, what you really want is not a hose bib. You want to install a freeze-proof hydrant. So the pipe goes down in the ground and then comes up out of the ground. And you'll see in the video, we demonstrate how it works. But when you turn it off, the valve is 2 feet underground, and all that water drains out underground, so that the hydrant itself that you have your hose hooked up to will never freeze. And so I had a friend give me a hard time first time he saw it. He's like, this guy's not very smart. He's got all these hoses out here. Those are all going to freeze. And I said, yeah, those are freeze proof. You can, They will never freeze. And he's like, oh, I guess you were pretty smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so those are really cool. We have one in our yard, and that's where we water everything from. John actually will no longer allow me to use any of the hose bibs that are attached to our house because we had a huge basement
Yeah.
flood.
We had one of them break and flooded our basement, and that was a nightmare. And so,
And he covers them every year,
Yep.
right?
It's-
It was,
it's just like, we're not going to mess with this anymore. So I just shut the valves for those.
it's like, you will not use these.
We're done. And I'll
You're
provide-
cut off. You're cut off.
Yeah, wherever you need hoses, I will run hoses from the frostproof valve. And
Even if you live in the city, better to have one of those than have a bad experience like you just described in your
So
house.
expensive. It's so expensive.
Yeah.
You mean to have one fail? Yeah.
yeah,
To have one.
when they,
Yeah, because we had just put in new flooring right in our basement. We had just finished it all. And, within a very short period of time,
about 20 minutes. And
it was ruined. It
Oh,
was all ruined. Yeah, very expensive.
So I also gave you a video of a tool it's kind of like, I didn't know they made that. So I do a lot of cutting of metal around here. I demonstrated cutting a chain. I also demonstrated cutting a piece of a cattle panel. So out here on the homestead, we make all kinds of structures out of cattle panel. I made part of a trailer out of cattle panel. I made a goat shelter out of cattle panel. And I cut it with a battery operated bolt cutter.
Yep.
So again, the nice thing about that is you can hold what you're cutting with one hand and cut with the other hand, where if you're using bolt cutters, normal bolt cutters, takes two hands, and then you have no control over what you're cutting off and where's it going to go when you go ting and it shoots a piece of metal over there.
Yeah. Those were so cool.
And then the last thing that, we would probably just, mention kind of just as a teaser is the biochar kiln.
Ooh.
So
Our kiln?
if you were to Google biochar on the internet, you would find areas down in the actual Amazon, not the company, the area in South America, where they have used biochar for hundreds of years. And so we learned how to do it, and I built a kiln. So maybe on some future time together, we'll show you how to build the kiln and how to make
what it's for, because it's very
basically
beneficial.
It allows you to make permanent fertilizer for your garden.
That sounds like something we really should jump into in detail. So
I would love that.
let's
We can
put
look
that
forward
on
to
the
that
list
video.
maybe for the next one.
Thank you so much, Dennis and Michelle. You guys are a wealth of information. Someday I would love to come out and visit your homestead. You guys are doing amazing things. And, some of it would apply to a homestead, but there's a lot of this that can apply to those of us that are trying to be more self-sufficient with our own backyards.
Yeah.
And I can't emphasize enough, and you've made the point very well, but having the right tool for the job just makes such an important difference in your ability to get it done quickly and safely, and keep the naughty words to a minimum.
And my
So anyway, thank you so much for sharing this with us, and we will look forward to the next one, which I'm hoping will be
soon. Let's do
the
that.
biochar kiln.
Yeah. And now for our audience, the question of the day: what is the most important tool in your toolbox? Comment below and let's learn from each other. Hey, thanks for being part of the solution.